had to tell my mum, I had to give her a call, and in the same conversation tell her that I was pregnant, but then that I had a miscarriage.
From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter, the podcast for people who like to lean in to other people's life stories. Libby Trickett is an actual golden girl. She's won 4 Olympic gold medals and 15 World Championship gold medals. She's also won lots of silver and bronze medals, but it's all the gold ones that make her stand out as one of the most decorated and famous swimmers in Australian history. She was at her peak when Australia was big time in love with swimming. Those golden men and women really embodied so much that was great about sport and about our culture. They were fit and healthy. And most importantly, at that time when Libby was swimming, they looked like they were having a lot of fun. I'm sure you remember, who could forget, that beaming smile on pool decks and on podiums around the world as Libby won and won and won. She thought the winning was actually the hard part because, you know, this is a sport where the difference between first and last place can come down to something ridiculous like less than a second. But it was actually when she retired that things got really hard for Libby Trickett. There was depression, and then there was post-natal depression that culminated in an extremely upsetting moment alone in the car with her baby daughter. And that's when she knew that she needed help. As a woman in the public eye, a sporting legend, and a national treasure from the time she was in her early 20s, Libby could have swanned off into retirement and experienced her struggles away from the limelight. No one would have ever known. And she did. But now that she's out the other side and she has some perspective, she's taken the very generous decision to share the shit times as well as the good ones. She wants to help women just like her. Not just the ones who've won multiple gold medals, but the ones who've struggled with self-worth, identity, and the feelings of loss that can come along hand in hand with love after you become a mother. Libby's written a book about all of this. It's called Beneath the Surface. It's a beautiful memoir, and she joined me in the No Filter studios to talk about it. Here's Libby. Libby Trickett, you've got the best smile of anyone I've ever known.
Thank you. That's so nice.
And, you know, there was a time when there were like lots of swimmers and you all looked a little bit the same. You were like
totally.
The golden girls. But you always stood out with your beautiful smile. You smiled with your whole face, almost your whole body.
Yeah.
You smiled.
I just loved what I was doing. I hope that came across and resonated with people because I loved swimming. I loved competing.
It looked like you did. It really looked like you did. And your book, Beneath the Surface, I was a little bit dreading to read. Not dreading. But,
You're like, oh, do I have to? It's got to be about swimming.
Yeah. And, you know, swimmers' lives, they don't do a lot because you guys spend so many years swimming up and down the pool.
Yes.
But I absolutely love the way you've written it. You've divided it into 2 and the chapters flip back and forth between the 2. One is your swimming career and one is your career after swimming.
Yes.
And that's what I want to focus more on today, the career after swimming.
Yeah.
Because I actually loved the swimming chapters too. I found that really interesting. But, and this is going to sound awful, it all kind of blurred. It was like a gold medal and a world record and another gold medal and a bronze medal. And it was devastating because I was like a fraction of a second slower than someone. And then I won a gold and then I won a silver. And it all just is kind of the same, which
Totally.
Is that how it feels for you when you look back at your swimming time?
Yes and no. I mean, now that there's so long since I've been swimming, it sort of has that feel, you know, it sort of blurs, you know, the 7 or 8 years that I was on the Australian team sort of just blurs into one whole team essentially. But that's why I really liked that concept of flipping back and forth. I'm glad you kind of like it because
it works, because if you hadn't have done that, it would have felt
boring.
Yeah.
I get it.
I mean, what you did was astonishing, but it's hard to go, that's astonishing, because that was your job for all those years.
And there's no peaks and troughs, I guess. And it makes it sound, it makes it more interesting, I think, for the reader to sort of see the delineation between, you know, my swimming career and my life as a swimmer to being outside of the sport and learning how to live a real life and becoming a parent and all of the different challenges and difficulties that presents in itself. So, yeah, I think it makes for a more interesting read the way that we were able to sort of pull it together.
Because you say there were no peaks and troughs in that swimming time. There are massive ones.
Yes.
But they're due to like a fraction of a second.
Yeah, and it's only probably an experience that I would have had. People would look from the outside and see me, win a silver medal at the Beijing Games in the 100 freestyle, and they would have been like, oh, that's an amazing achievement. But for me, that was one of the most incredibly disappointing races of my swimming career. So it's kind of hard to understand, and I hope that people are able to sort of resonate with different parts of the book, because I'm sure, going into it, you would have been like, there's no connection that I could have possibly had to me and my experiences, but in both the swimming aspect and also, life after sport, I hope that people can sort of see and take different things and maybe relate them to their own experiences.
You start the life after swimming part of the book in the green room at the project, where you're about to go onto the desk and announce your retirement.
Yeah, it was a really surreal moment, I think, to make the decision to retire, because I really had a sense of finality in that moment, because I'd already retired once before. But I had an injury. It didn't seem like it was going to heal anytime soon. I was 27. Basically time to sort of put my big girl pants on. And
it's a weird time to retire though, in the scheme of things.
Totally. Late 20s, I've spent, the entirety of my 20s being a swimmer and not really knowing what else I could possibly do in this world. And I hadn't had a great experience retiring the first time, so I was pretty nervous about going back into that place. But yeah, it was really bizarre. And when you are coming from being a really high achiever in something and something that you're so passionate about and love, to go into a world of not quite sure, and everybody expects you to kind of retire to something because you're only 27 and you have to have another career, you have to have another passion, you have to have another direction. And I just didn't have that. So you kind of make something up and hope people don't ask too many questions about it, and then move into the real world and the reality of being a retired athlete again.
What happened the first time you retired?
I was so ready to move on from the sport. It was 100% my decision. It wasn't injury or illness or anything that was sort of getting in the way. I was just ready to see what the world had in store, I guess. I just felt like, well, I used to swim good. I'm sure, I've been in the media for the majority of my adult life. Something will happen and I'll get a job and, things will just move swiftly on into the end of time, essentially. And the phone didn't ring. And then it did ring, but then I went into sort of this weird part-time role with Channel 10 at the time. But, I was working with journalists who had been at university and actually learned how to cut stories and do interviews. And so I felt like a complete imposter, like complete fraud, and didn't really get the training that I anticipated that I might get.
So you had fame but no skills.
Totally. Zero skills.
And our currency, our kind of attention economy really values fame.
Yeah, especially, it's gotten even more exaggerated, I think, in 2019, but certainly in 2010 that still had some currency. And so, when I had the reality of working in this role and having absolutely no idea what I was doing, and then, taking away the fact that I had stopped training 35 hours a week, that serotonin and endorphins drop. I'd put on about 10 kilos because I continued to eat as though I was training 35 hours a week, and I was no longer doing that. And then just being removed from your social network, because all of my best friends were from the swimming world. So it was a really difficult time. I didn't know how to value myself outside of the pool, and you're not getting constant feedback, because in the pool you're getting constant feedback on, whether it is, tangibly that time was good or not good.
Yeah. Everything is very measurable and quantifiable.
So black and white and so clear, the progression forward, whereas the real world is so grey.
I got really cranky and sort of gobsmacked reading the parts of your book about after your retirements, because it seemed so obvious to me the incredible life-changing implications physically, financially, mentally of retirement But I was like, where's the help?
Yes.
Where's the Australian Institute of Sport? Where is the program that I just assumed and the assistance that would be given to athletes who were moving into this next chapter of their lives?
We're getting better at it.
Are we? Because we couldn't get worse.
No, well, that's true. It's a good point that you make.
I was genuinely shocked. I don't know how it works with footballers, but my understanding is that, they get financial advice and they get training and what are you going to do after sport? And they're sort of, while they're even still in the sport, they're prepared for life on the other side.
So I would say probably that AFL is, the pinnacle of preparing for life after sport, and they certainly expect their athletes to study or work while they are playing and help with that sort of transition process. And I think, definitely for Swimming Australia, we need to do better in that respect. It's a hard thing. So, thinking back to me being 19, 20, and then, at that stage thinking about retirement, I was probably pretty arrogant, 6 foot tall and bulletproof. I'm going to be fine in retirement. It's going to be fine. Like, that's 5, 6, 7 years away potentially.
That's a problem for future Libby.
Yeah, totally. Future me will deal with that and it'll be fine. So it's kind of hard to navigate that with athletes, but it's certainly something that needs to be done. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be part of perhaps the Swimming Australia contract with the athletes, that they are either studying or working part-time, doing internships, just trying to find a passion outside of the sport, because that's basically what I've had to do for the last 7 years since retiring, is find my next passion and find... Because, the majority of athletes, if you are training as hard as we are, you have a lot of energy. And you need to channel that energy into something that feels valuable and feels like you're contributing. And, that's kind of what I've had to do for the last 7 years. And it's been hit and miss. And I've had a ton of different careers since retiring from swimming. But, now at 34, I kind of feel like I see the direction. I still don't see anything tangible necessarily, but I understand what my passion is and, perhaps how I can apply it in the real world.
It's just so baffling to think that we go, why do these athletes
go off the rails?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you could see it coming, surely.
It's like a slow motion train wreck.
Yeah.
Totally.
And again with the new ones. And have we not learnt anything from the previous generations? And I assumed you would still be seeing your sports psychologist that you see during your career.
So I do.
But that was your call, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was.
And you pay for it.
Totally, yeah. That's out of my pocket, and she's amazing. And it's been wonderful to work with her as an athlete, all the way through that high performance sort of aspect of my life, and then moving into the real world. And she's become probably more of like a business coach / psychologist, but also helps give me direction and planning, because we weren't doing that I wasn't doing that as an athlete. My coach was making my plan and I was just executing the plan to the best of my ability. So it's
quite childlike, isn't it?
Oh, and this is the thing too. Like, we are in such a bubble when we're an athlete. At 27, heading to the London Olympics, I was told what to pack, where to go, where to be at what time. You don't have to think, which is excellent when you're trying to perform at the highest level, because you want to, streamline what you're there to do, your job, which is to perform at the highest level. So to not have to think about that and not navigate that is brilliant, but it doesn't really set you up for real life.
You talk about all the different ways that you tried to find your thing, like your passion, something that could somehow compete with swimming. Is that why so many swimmers in particular come back after retirement, because they just can't find anything else out there?
Well, that's why I came back for the first time. And to be fair, I don't know that I would have retired had I not gotten injured. I'm very open about that, because swimming...
The first time or the second time?
Second time. I wouldn't have retired the second time, I don't think. I had every intention of going to the 2016 Rio Olympics. That was my next big goal. I was going to go to a fourth Olympics and was in the pool training already when I injured myself. So it was...
was that realistic as a goal now that you look back?
I don't know. At the time, it definitely felt completely real, and it felt like it would have been a waste to have, spent the last... the better part of 2 years coming back and getting fit again and trying to compete at that level if I hadn't gone on to, try and achieve more. But I think the world works in the way that it's supposed to, the universe or whatever things are sort of, directing us in some way. So if I hadn't have had such a serious injury, I think I would have not made the Australian team and gone, it's probably time to move on now.
There are those external markers that act as a tap on the shoulder, like not making national teams.
Totally. Yeah, I think that would have been the thing that stopped me from moving forward, unless I had the major injury that I did in my wrist. I always believe things happen for a reason. As hard as it was and as terrifying as it felt to sort of go into retirement again, especially knowing that I had no idea what I was in for and no idea what to anticipate and no idea where I was actually going. Yeah, that was really scary, but I knew that it was the right decision, so I sort of jumped in and hoped for the best.
You were really honest in the book about the change in financial circumstances because you were there at the absolute peak of the rivers of gold flowing to swimmers. What was that time like and where did the money come from?
Sponsorships, mainly.
And what did you have to do for those sponsorships?
Not much, which sounds really terrible, but...
Sounds great.
I mean, it was amazing at the time. But it's again, that doesn't prepare you for real life.
So give us an example without naming actual sponsors, but like how much would a sponsorship be worth? What might you have to do in a year? Would it be a year or would it be 4 years? Or
it depends on the contract. Every contract was different. They usually worked in 4-year cycles because Olympics is the main thing. And, swimming comes into people's minds every 4 years essentially. But depending on the timing of the Olympic cycle, usually the 12 months before the Olympics is when the money really got generated because that's when people were, the Olympics is coming up, this is happening. The swimmers are going to do really well kind of thing. So probably the biggest contract I had was around the $100,000 mark and I probably had 6 to 10 appearances a year.
And at what kind of places? Like it might be a supermarket.
Yeah, you could be opening a supermarket or launching a new product or... I did superannuation once, all sorts of things. So it really depended on, who my managers were talking to and, who they were chasing, who they knew were sort of looking for athletes or, people to represent their companies. So it was a weird time and it honestly, it doesn't set you up at all for life after sport because as soon as that starts to dwindle, like no one's going to pay you $100,000 to sort of do 6 appearances in 12 months.
Sadly.
No, sadly. Damn it, that doesn't happen anymore. But that really started to dwindle at the end of my career anyway because I believe after 2008 swimming started to take a hit for lots of different reasons. And that was really hard to see the sport go through such a difficult time. And even now, people aren't as aware of who the swimmers are and who they should be cheering for.
Apart from Kate and Bronte Campbell.
Yes, exactly.
I can't name a single swimmer.
Which is crazy because we literally had 2 Olympic individual medalists at the last Olympics and I don't know anyone who could name them.
No.
Which is terrible.
You talk about how you think a lot of that happened, was it 2008 and 2009 with the suits?
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it started a little bit in 2008. So Speedo brought out the Laser Racer suit, which was an incredible piece of equipment, but it just blew out to all proportions.
What did it look like?
Sleek and black.
But long. Before that, it was like the tighter and smaller the swimming costume was.
Yes.
And the more hairless you were, the faster you would be perceived to swim through the water.
Yes.
And
between probably 2000 and 2008, the suits got longer and sort of more coverage happened basically. And then they got tighter and firmer and the material changed and it was all about, water repelling. And then, so the Laser Racer was sort of the first step that took swimming in a completely difficult direction, which basically went into this performance enhancing direction with a number of other sort of companies creating their own suits, which essentially became wetsuits that were able to be incredibly buoyant, which, contributed to a huge amount of world records, which contributed to a huge performance increased across the board. It was remarkable.
And how did it work for the countries because they were expensive, the suits, right?
Yeah,
how
they
much
always
were
are.
they?
Anywhere between $500 and $600, maybe $800 for the, not the dodgy ones. That sounds terrible. But the really performance enhancing
And who
ones.
pays for that?
Well, it depends. So for Swimming Australia, we had a sponsorship with Speedo at the time. And so when we went to the Rome World Championships, everyone wanted to wear the other suits because they were...
Oh, it was a different brand.
Yeah, 2 different brands that were particularly performance enhancing. So, yeah, it was a really difficult time because I was a Speedo athlete at the time and I didn't want to obviously...
Upset your sponsor.
Yeah,
they were paying your bills.
They're paying my bills. They're a long-term sponsor. I really believe that these suits were performance enhancing, and so fundamentally I had a lot against that. So for me, I opted in my individual races to wear the Speedo suits, but for the relays, I wore the other suits because I didn't want to disadvantage my team.
So you wore a normal cosy for your individual races, which were you like the only one in your race?
Yeah, not many wore the Speedo suits that year.
So that was a real statement that you were making.
Yeah, it was a personal commitment that I made to myself and the value and integrity that I felt strongly towards being anti the performance enhancing and really believing that that's what it was.
And was that meet in Rome peak suit?
Yes. So between 2008 and 2009, every single world record got broken except for Grant Hackett's 1,500 metres freestyle world record. So if that's not performance enhancing, I don't really know what is, especially in the year after an Olympics.
So it's unusual for every world, like that's not a usual year, right? How many world records would get beaten in a year?
1 or 2, maybe.
And like all of them?
Yeah, all of them bar one. And it wasn't even just world records. It was, I remember the men's 100 breaststroke in Rome. There's the world championship record for the meet. So that's the fastest anyone has ever swum at that particular meet, the world championships. And in that year, the top 16 beat the world championship record time. So
all in the suits?
All in the suits, yeah, 100%. And it's the year after the Olympics. People have usually had 3 months out of the water. We're not usually peak fitness. We're tired. It's the start of a new Olympic cycle. We don't normally see that many world records in that year, if any.
So the suits got banned?
They did, yeah.
But swimming took a hit as a shiny sport.
Yeah, the reputation. I think people started to go, oh, well, if we're not seeing world records, it's boring, basically. So there's that expectation that gets set. But then also the integrity of the sport, you know, you're wearing performance-enhancing suits. And then we didn't stay on sort of the real free-to-air channels, so 7/9, which is where we had been. We went to Channel 1. So, you know, we used to have nationals being broadcast at prime time.
Yeah, I remember.
People looking forward to seeing who's going to make the team. And, you know, on Channel 1, I think we were broadcast after MASH reruns at 10 p.m. at night. So people can't buy in. People can't buy into the story, to the journey of the athletes. And, you know, really we're only sort of prominent once every 4 years anyway, so it makes it difficult when you're coming up against sports that are played, you know, week in and week out all year round. So
after you retired, I think it was understandable to imagine that there'd be a TV career.
Yes.
Because
that's what we all do.
Yeah, you were so popular and you're so effervescent and divine and outgoing, and it would seem like an obvious thing.
So I tried my hand. I definitely tried my hand at TV because I just thought that was the next thing. Like,
who doesn't want to be on TV, right?
Who doesn't want to be on TV? I had experience with, you know, working with the media. I understood sort of how things worked, but to actually live and work in the media, especially in television, it's a very different thing. And unless you're prepared to be in Sydney and be available at any time, it makes it very difficult. And when you have the stresses of, you know, a financial burden of not getting any money anymore, how do you live in Sydney? So there was a number of elements that didn't gel for me. And the only sort of job that I was getting in TV, I did do a reality TV show.
What was it?
Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, of course you did.
Yes. I got fourth, by the way, not competitive at all, but that's pretty good for someone who's not a performer.
I was so relieved when I was reading about that because I'd forgotten that you did that. And it was like you fell on it like a thirsty person
Yes.
on an oasis of water.
Oh, my God.
It was like, yes, this is something I understand.
Yes.
This is training, physical
Yes.
activity, a goal.
100%. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love the physical element of it. And I was, the whole, it's good for your brand, it's good for your
of
exposure.
course.
So I was like, cool, maybe something will come from this. Because up until that point, I hadn't had any sort of job offers. And I'd been retired for almost a year at that stage. So I basically threw myself at the producers, like, give me a job. So, yeah, it was a really interesting sort of time. But the only sort of jobs that I got after that were the talking heads. What's your opinion about this? And
We both had the experience of being girls on the grill
Yes,
on the Today Show.
and you get 30 seconds.
Can you explain to people what that's like from the talent point of view, as you're called?
Yeah, it's such a bizarre experience. And it was at the time when, television spending was probably still quite high. And, they were flying me down from Brisbane, staying overnight, drivers taking me to and from the airport, to and from the studio. And basically I'd go and get my hair and makeup done for an hour before we went on air. And then I would be on air for anywhere between 1 and 5 minutes.
Yep, and it was kind of like the women's issues part of the show. And it would usually be the male host and then
Yes.
there would be some
3 women.
3 women on the couch.
Yes.
And they would give the topic and then you would, one at a time, give a little sound bite that was rarely more than 30 seconds.
Yes.
And then you'd go home.
Yes.
Having added absolutely nothing of any value to any topic whatsoever.
And you know what? At the start, it was kind of like, oh, this is exciting. I get to fly
Yeah.
to Sydney every week and maybe I'll meet, do some networking and meet some people and maybe get a job somehow through that. And then very quickly I realised that wasn't going to happen. And, like you said, it just felt like you weren't going to add any value. You're not changing the world in any way. And, I barely care about what my opinion is about most things. So what does anyone else care about what my opinion is as well? Like what experience do I have to talk about the things that we were talking about? It was a very bizarre experience.
Is it weird being famous but still needing money?
I always find it funny. Sometimes when I'm doing my grocery shopping, the amount of times that people are going, do you do your own grocery shopping? And I'm like, yeah, like, who do you think that I am?
Yeah.
I used to swim good. Like, that's what I did about 1 billion years ago. And this is real life. Like, I don't have my entourage sending them out to, go do my groceries for me. Although online grocery shopping is amazing, especially as a parent.
But you kind of think, well, I guess you can't pay, bills with gold medals.
But that's it, exactly right. And, at the time, my husband was starting his own business. And when you're, at the very start of starting a business, you don't earn any money, and any money that you do earn goes straight back into the business. So I was sort of the sole provider for our family for probably the better part of a decade. And that's really scary when my income was completely irregular at best. It's hard to plan for paying bills that are coming in all the time.
Hard to get a loan.
It's just hard to pay for your groceries every single week. And that's kind of scary. And then, you do go into these things, I might have to do a presenting job, which is great, but you have to look like you're a presenter. And I have, 10-year-old dresses and you're like, you don't feel like, again, it felt very much like I was an imposter and a fraud and people were just going to find me out somehow. And I think during that time, I really started to understand that I just need to be who I am and dress how I do. And most of the time people don't really give a shit too much about what you're doing.
Luke is a through line through your book. You guys got together when you were pretty much kids still, right?
I was 17, and he was 19.
And he was also a swimmer.
Yes.
You met at an airport.
Yes.
On your way to some swimming thing.
Our first youth team, so.
You've been together ever since and supported each other in some ups and downs, except for a period of about 6 months when you separated after you got married.
Yeah. When you get together with someone so young, you have to actively grow together. Like, you are still individuals. You're still learning to be an adult and who you are as a person, that if you don't actively come together to grow as a couple, you're going to diverge on different paths. And I felt like that's probably where we were going during that time. And, you know, I got married at 22 and he was 24, and I love him to bits, but he's a hard guy to deal with sometimes. He's so not a normal person, and so he doesn't think normally about things. So I've had to explain to him a number of situations that this is not how most people deal with this situation. And you're like you're an outlier.
So many people are nodding their heads right now going, yes, that's my partner.
Yeah. And it's so hilarious, and we can joke about it now, and he understands that's part of his personality, and he probably has learnt to ask if that's sort of a normal reaction to some things. But yeah, we were sort of going down different paths, and because he was so intensely focused on his business.
And you were lost.
And I was completely lost. And, you know, we'd met with this, you know, singular passion of swimming. That's, you know, part of how we connected in the first place. And so he had found his passion outside of the sport, but I had no idea who I was or who I wanted to be. So it was a really difficult time, and I was definitely in a point of depression, and he was in this weird point of just being obsessive about his work and his business. And it was like a singular focus that he had. And I think it took me asking him to leave for him to realise that that's not okay, and he has to sort of open up his mind. And to his credit, he's been incredible ever since. But yeah, it was definitely an act of coming back together. And I think we've had to continue to do that. I think all marriages, all relationships have to do that.
You've got to keep choosing to be together, right?
You do, absolutely.
And you guys also had counselling separately and together during that time, so it's not like you just accidentally found your way back to each other.
Oh, God, no.
It was a deliberate choice to say, let's fight for this.
A conscious choice, for sure. And I couldn't see my life with him, but I couldn't see my life without him. You know, and you have to have fun as well. Like we were under a lot of pressure at a young age. There's lots of things that we were navigating both together and individually, but you have to work on it, and we had to have fun again. Like, we lost the fun, and so often that happens in relationships. Like, it all becomes about, you know, now it's all about kids and work and life stuffs, just everyday life stuffs, that you have to remind yourself of why you got together with your partner in the first place. And I dig him. He's super funny. He's gorgeous and all of those sorts of things, but you forget that in the day-to-day doldrums of life.
When you decided to try to have a family, how much of that was about, well, this can help me rebuild my identity after being a swimmer?
It was 100% about that, which is, again, sounds terrible, but at the time I needed a project.
Of course.
I think
that's a reason why a lot of people have babies.
It's the next thing.
Yeah.
You know, gotten married.
Yeah.
You know, the baby is the next big milestone that we look towards. And certainly that's how it felt for me. You know, it became all about cycle mapping and temperature taking. And
again, you must have been really comfortable in that realm.
Yeah.
Because it's like your body as an instrument.
Yes, totally. And understanding, you know, how my body worked, which was difficult because I have PCOS and
polycystic ovarian syndrome, which can make it hard to get pregnant.
Yeah, and, you know, my cycle would be anything from 28 days to 60 days, and having no idea whether I actually ovulate during that time as well. So it became my project that we were going to work towards, and, you know, that's the next big milestone.
And you achieved your goal and you got pregnant quite quickly, but then at the 9-week scan, there was no heartbeat.
Yeah, that was incredibly difficult. It's so funny because I still feel like this weird guilt of feeling such grief for such an early miscarriage. Yeah. I have come to understand that everybody's experiences are different, and, you know, another person who had a miscarriage at the same point might not experience that grief. But I've learnt to not compare the experiences, because my grief is my grief and my experience is my experience. And, yeah, everyone is different. But I remember being just floored because we had an early scan at around 6 weeks, which had shown a heartbeat. And so went on to Google, and Google says that a heartbeat at 6 weeks means like 90-something% of pregnancies go on to be happy and healthy.
Good stats.
Amazing stats, right? So I was like, cool, we've reached a milestone. Everything's going to be great. This is the next thing that I'm working on. Lots to look forward to. And when I went and met my obstetrician for the first time and we did another scan, it was like I could see what was happening outside of myself. And it was almost like it was slow motion, the way that it happened. And when he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we can't find a heartbeat," I was just completely floored, completely sideswiped, I guess, because it just had seemed so real and so tangible and so positive. And it was like, this is the next thing that I'm moving on to with my life, and it's really positive. This is a really exciting step in my life.
You recount that story so beautifully and so insightfully, because you say, through the fog of my sort of shock, I recognised that this was something that he did all the time.
All the time.
Had this conversation, breaking this news. And I've been in that room too, where you're just like, oh my God, my whole world's just tilted on its axis. But it's an absolutely unremarkable day. As compassionate and as lovely as they are,
it happens every day.
It happens every day. And then also there's the sense of, well, the fact that it happens every day, why am I feeling so bad about it? Because this is super common.
Totally, yeah.
But for you, it's the end of the world.
Yeah, and that was my first experience of parenthood and motherhood, and to sort of go into that was very difficult. There's a line in the book actually, which makes me cry every time I read it, which is I had to tell my mum, I had to give her a call, and in the same conversation tell her that I was pregnant, but then that I had a miscarriage. And there's a line that just says, I was so excited to tell you. So,
I cried when I read that line too.
Gets me every time.
Yeah.
Because I was so excited to share that with my mum and to share that experience and to create that even deeper connection that I have with my mother. So that was really hard. And it's so funny because that was 5 years ago now, and it still hurts, and you still have those moments where, I know the date that the baby was supposed to be born. It was the 25th of March, and every time that sort of date comes around, I'm reminded of what that baby could have been, and of course, if that baby had been my little girl, Poppy wouldn't have been. So it's
a weird type of weird grief, isn't it?
It is a weird grief,
and
yeah.
I often say to people, it will make more sense when you're holding your next baby in your arms. For some people, there isn't a next baby, and I find in my experience, those people, their wound stays raw in a way that it can still be raw, but as you say, if that little baby had come through, you wouldn't have had Poppy.
Yeah.
So did the grief shift a little bit when you were holding Poppy in your arms?
Definitely. But until I was pregnant again, and until we'd gotten through that 12-week mark, and until, she was physically in my arms, it was, you feel anxious and you have apprehension around what's going to happen next because I was so sideswiped and so unexpected. You kind of expect the unexpected. And I still, I'm in my third pregnancy and, I'm well pregnant now. I'm 32 weeks. So it's one of those things that until they're there with you, you just don't know what's going to happen.
But also even when they are, you never stop worrying.
Oh, my God.
It's like, when the 12-week scan, the next scan, when they're born, when they're one, when they're – no, my son just turned 22.
And you never stop worrying.
No, you never stop worrying. When did the darkness after Poppy was born, when did you first become aware of the darkness inside your head?
Well, I went through the baby blues, which I think is completely normal. Everybody goes through that. And that probably lasted around 3 weeks. I remember Luke coming home from work and I would, burst into tears. I was bawling my eyes out. He's like, oh, my God, what's wrong? What's happened? I was like, nothing. It was a good day today. But you just are so hormonal and so overwhelmed with emotion and the transition and all of those sorts of things. I think I got really smug around 4 months, and she was not a great sleeper during the day, always a cat napper, which was frustrating. She always seemed cranky during the day. You always had to change what she was doing every 2 minutes because she just needed to be engaged or doing something else, or she'd get frustrated that she couldn't reach a particular toy or whatever it was. But then she'd sleep 8 to 10 hours at night. And I was like,
Amazing.
I'm nailing this.
Yeah.
First time parenthood, probably should write a book because everybody's doing it wrong.
Where's my gold medal?
Yeah, that's it. I need some recognition for how awesome I'm doing at this point. But then about 4 months, I don't know whether it is that 4-month sleep regression that everyone talks about, but she just stopped sleeping. It's like she just decided that sleep was no longer for her and she didn't want to do it. And she started waking every hour and a half, every hour, and then it became every 45 minutes. And that went on for a period of about 5 months.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And everybody tells you, and I was so I don't know, when I was first becoming a mother and learning about motherhood, it was all about attachment parenting, and that's who I wanted to be. I was, all about having the baby on you. And
do you think that you're just drawn to that because it's quite extreme?
I don't know what.
Because that is quite, like, attachment parenting is not good for mothers.
It completely disregards the mother's mental health. Well, I don't know. It depends. If it works for you, and
if it works for you,
it's great,
awesome.
Right? And you have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
But when it stops working for you is when you need to find a different way. And I was so stubborn and so adamant that I needed to be more for Poppy. If I just loved her enough, then I would be enough for her to go to sleep and sleep through. And everybody sort of tells you, especially in that sort of attachment parenting sphere, they will sleep when they're ready. And, I would hear stories about women with kids who still don't sleep through at, 3, 4, 5 years of age.
I was doing control crying with my son at 4 still. And yes, maybe they will eventually sleep through, but at what cost to the mother's mental health?
So that's basically the point that I got to. We were co-sleeping. I was breastfeeding her to sleep, but she would literally wake every 45 minutes. And for some people, co-sleeping works, and that's awesome, and, good on them, and that would be amazing if that had have worked.
But it's this idea of unless you completely sacrifice everything.
Who you are and all of your mental health.
And every need, basic fundamental need, desire, you'd internalise the idea that made you a bad mum.
Correct.
And that the reason that she was crying is
because I was bad.
Because you were bad at this job.
I had very little self-worth at that point because somehow I was doing something wrong. And of course, when you are that sleep deprived, it affects everything. It affects decision making, and so everything was hard. Is she hungry? Does she need a change? Like, just little decisions like that were so incredibly taxing. Let alone how it affected my relationship with my husband, who was like, who the hell is this monster in front of me? I did not marry this person. And he's very pragmatic, very practical. He's like, well, let's just go see a sleep school or get a sleep consultant. And, I really resisted that for so long because I was like, I should be able to do this. I am her mother and I should be able to fix it somehow. That was sort of the really sort of steep descent that I went into, it all being my fault, and I shouldn't even be here because Poppy obviously doesn't like me. And, you start to have such dark thoughts. They're the things that start to really scare me because I'm a very, sort of practical person and someone who can be very self-assured and, has been able to achieve lots in her life. But I just had nothing and had no self-worth, and it's as though Poppy would have been better off without me. But on the flip side, you're also very resentful and bitter of this little baby who's stealing your sleep and making life so hard.
I'm so glad you wrote about that because the anger is something that no one talks about and no one says because you're not meant to.
Yes.
And what mother is angry with their baby?
Especially, a 6-month-old baby.
It's not logical. And also, were you worried that you'd harm her, or you knew on some level that you never would?
The anger was something that was really surprising to me because I didn't know that sort of postnatal depression could include a symptom such as anger. I had no idea about that, but I was so angry at everything and so resentful and so missing my old life where I was completely in control of everything. And all of a sudden there's this little squishy being who relies completely on you and is stealing all of your sleep and making life really challenging at that time. And yeah, it made...
And unpleasant, let's be honest.
Oh, completely unpleasant.
You write at one point, I became aware there were no pure moments. Because everyone has bits of the day when they're like, oh, you little shit.
Yeah.
And then, oh my God, I love you. And the darkness, you write, just started to edge out all the light.
There was no joy at all during that period of time. And, you know, that still makes me sad to think that I missed out on those moments, because she's a beautiful little thing. She had a receding hairline and she was hilarious and really active and interesting.
You couldn't see it.
But I couldn't see it at the time. I just couldn't. I couldn't feel connection to her. She was like a monster to me. And obviously the monster was in my head.
Did you think postnatal depression?
Not initially.
Because it creeps up on you, right?
It does. It really did. Like I knew that I wasn't coping, but at no point I sort of went, oh, I think I have postnatal depression.
You just thought Libby's shit.
Yeah, I'm shit. Clearly you're crap and all of the things that you're doing are crap. But I didn't have a word for it at that stage. But I definitely thought terrible thoughts about my child. I thought about throwing her out windows. I thought about leaving her on the side of the road. I want to talk about that sort of side of things, because a lot of women, they say I had dark thoughts, but, you know.
What were the dark thoughts?
What are the dark thoughts that you're experiencing?
Jessica Rowe very famously wrote about wanting to hide the knives in the house.
Yes. Oh, she was such a shining light for me during that time, because I remember reading her book and seeing those things, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Like, obviously I didn't have the same sort of thoughts, but...
Just the window, not the knives.
Yeah, just the window. Shut all of those windows. And I knew I had enough self-control or whatever it is to not harm her, but it started to get really scary. You know, I'd put her down too roughly or pick her up too roughly. And you'd have these moments where you just wanted to shake your baby, and that terrified me. And it wasn't until that I had sort of, I feel like, my rock bottom moment where I was trying to do my self-care. I was trying to go to the gym and take care of myself physically, because I know that makes me feel good mentally. But the gym that I was going to it was a mums and bubs class. It was about 25 minutes from my house, and Poppy was going through a phase of hating the car. And as soon as I put her in, she started screaming. And 2 minutes into the drive, it's like I lost all control of my life, of myself, of everything that I had known beforehand. And I was just screaming. I was screaming at her. I was screaming at the world. I was screaming at myself. I don't know that I was actually saying anything. I think it was literally just animalistic roaring.
And while you were driving?
While I was driving. And I got to the gym, and when I arrived, I realised I had no memory of actually driving. And that moment for me made me really scared. That made me feel really out of control. And sort of that was the first step that I needed to take, to ask for help and recognising that it was more than just thinking that I was a bit shit.
Who did you ask?
I called Luke first. That was the very first call that I made. And then I called my GP. And that was the best step that I could have taken. We need to place more value of having a good GP because they're so important. And, you know, that consistency of care is so incredibly important in people's lives, I think. But I have a great GP. He's known me for many years now, and, yeah, just walked me through the process of how to get help. Talked about taking medication. I didn't end up taking medication, but we talked about all of the options, the whole process that we needed to go through. And, yeah, he sort of held my hand every step of the way, which is so amazing. And especially because I was seeing him pretty regularly. And there were a few times that I cancelled because I couldn't face anyone. I just couldn't face the day, and he would call at the end of the day just to make sure that I was doing okay. And I never answered the phone, of course, but he left a voicemail to make sure that I was just checking in, basically.
When you're diagnosed with postnatal depression, but it's a little bit like, in a way, being diagnosed with mastitis, which is an infection in your breast. You have to keep breastfeeding through the mastitis.
Yes.
it's not like you could stop parenting.
No.
After you were diagnosed with postnatal depression,
Yeah.
it's not like someone said, look, you go to Fiji.
Yeah, for
We'll
a
just
couple of
look after
months."
Poppy. But there were some really practical things that you were advised to do. One was to go and see a psychologist,
Yes.
and you went back to see your sports psychologist,
Yeah.
Georgia.
Yep.
Another was to have someone take care of Poppy for part of the week.
Yes.
And you really resisted that, right? Because you were like, I'm a stay-at-home mum.
Yeah, that's my job now. That's what I'm here to do. I'm on maternity leave at the moment. I don't know whether I was going to go back to the job that I was in at the time. And so this is my new role. And how could I just bucker off to daycare?
It's like, am I allowed to do
Yeah,
that?
is
Like,
that-
doesn't that mean I failed?
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I've completely leaned into having
Yeah.
those daycare days and all of that now. But at the time, it was incredibly difficult decision because I felt like, could we afford it? Because we still weren't financially secure at the time. Should I want to spend time away from my child? And so that was a really difficult thing. And it was one day a week we were looking at. Ridiculous. But it was such an important thing to give myself time for me, whatever that looked like, whether it was to go and sleep for 5 hours or whether it was to go to the gym or go get my nails done or
Just to remember who you are.
Just to remind yourself, oh, hey, you were a person before your child came along. There are things that you love and connect with outside of being the role of a mother. And so, motherhood is a role that I have and that I'm very passionate about and that I love now. But it's not all of who I am, just like I was a swimmer, that was a role that I played and it's part of who I was, but it's not all of who I am. It's all of those different roles that come together that make the whole picture of each person. So, yeah, I get sad when women feel like they can't ask for that help or feel like they don't, if they are a stay-at-home mum, they can't justify sending their child to daycare or having a nanny or whatever it might be.
I think we're taught to internalise this idea that the definition of a good mum, certainly as per attachment to parenting, but even more broadly in society, is the same thing as being with your child all the time. All the time. That being with them all the time is what makes you a good mum.
Yeah.
And I just don't agree. I just think things like sleep training, which I also did, having someone else look after your child sometimes.
Yep.
It's
your
a
village.
happy. There's the expression happy wife, happy life that a lot of guys say, but I don't know what the equivalent is. Happy mother, happy baby.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the sort of journey that I've come to. And I think part of why I want to talk really openly about my experiences with motherhood and postnatal depression and, even on social media, like so many beautiful I don't know what you call them now, not mummy bloggers, but Instagram mummies or Insta mummy. I don't know what the word is for them now, but, they have these beautifully curated Instagram pages.
Influencers, they're called.
Yeah, influencers.
Parenting influencers.
Yeah. They live in a way that is beautiful and
Aesthetically pleasing.
And lovely to scroll through on Instagram. But for me, that's not my life. That's not the reality of the life that I live in. I like to poke fun at all of the hilarious moments that motherhood brings because, less than 10 years ago, I was, swimming on the world stage and winning Olympic medals. And now, I'm having to wipe my daughter's bottom every
no
time
gold
she has a
medals
poo.
for that, Libby.
No, exactly. And
no national anthem gets sung. No podiums.
And my daughter, Adrina, she's a little turd most of the time. She's like this feisty, fiery, knows exactly what she wants. She's 19 months old and she's already running the house. And I just find it hilarious that my life is ruled by a 4-year-old and a 19-month-old now. And it's wonderful and hilarious. And I think that creates such a wonderful connection with so many people around the world because if you can sort of laugh at it, then we all feel better for it, I think.
Were you shit scared to go again?
For the third time?
For the second time.
Oh, for the second time.
After having P&D with Poppy.
Yes. So once we got her sleeping sorted, that made such a difference.
You got the sleep trainer in,
I
someone
did.
to help with that.
Yeah, so that was part of the process for recovery.
Because sleep deprivation is a form of torture and makes you crazy. And the thing
Literally makes you crazy.
It literally makes you crazy. And the thing that's hard for partners is that they treat you like you're a person capable of making decisions.
Yes.
So you're so tired, but the thought of fixing the thing that's making you so tired just feels impossible.
Totally.
It seems somehow easier to just keep going in the same way you have. So in some ways I needed someone to almost give me permission to go, this is what we're doing.
There was a couple of things. I needed permission and I needed someone to tell me exactly what to do.
Yes.
That's my athlete mentality.
Because babies be cray. Who understands
they
them?
be cray. And I've not done it before. They don't come with an instruction manual. I just need someone to tell me exactly what to do and I will do it. I will nail it.
And you did.
And I did. And, there's so much judgment that happens, whether you co-sleep, whether you sleep train, whether you use disposable nappies, reusable nappies. There's just so much judgment. And especially I really felt that acutely with Poppy. And so, when I decided to do the sleep training, there was a couple of my family members who, sort of questioned that. And all you want to do is the best thing for your child.
Yeah.
You don't want to break your child or, damage them somehow. But I needed to be whole as well. And with the amount of sleep that I was getting, I was a danger both to myself and to my child.
And so she needed to be whole too because
she wasn't sleeping
exhausted.
either. Yeah, she wasn't sleeping either.
Yeah.
So
the person I got to do sleep training, her name was Elizabeth Sloan, and she's gone on to write a book called The Gift of Sleep.
Yes.
Because that's what she says. It's like it's not just giving a gift to you as a mother, it's giving a gift to the baby
them.
so that they know how to sleep.
Totally.
And they don't need a dummy or a boob or a rock and a pat or a whatever it is.
Absolutely.
They know how to put themselves to sleep. That is a gift.
Totally. And, some babies do sleep naturally more than others.
Oh, we're going to get emails. I can hear the comments and the emails. But you know what? Do what's right for you. If waking up every 45 minutes is fine for you and you can function on absolutely no sleep, more power to you.
You want to co-sleep, that's fine. If you want to co-sleep until they're 10, that's fine.
But if it's not working for you, throw out the shoulds.
100%. And I think that's where we as mothers and in parenthood we need to get to is if it's not working for you, find another way. There are other ways and you don't have to feel that judgment. And so I was so glad that I found the amazing sleep trainer that I went with, and she was brilliant and, was just allowed me to find a space that I was comfortable in and allowed Poppy to sleep. And Poppy sleeps now. She has basically slept through since that time and, obviously she gets sick and things like that and that always interrupts things. But she's always naturally slept less than what my second did. But once we got her sleeping sorted, I always knew that I wanted a second at least. And so I wanted to have a sibling for Poppy, probably because I'm lazy and I want someone to entertain.
Yeah, because playing with little kids is boring.
Oh, it's
better if they can play with each other.
It's so boring sometimes.
So boring.
Oh my God.
I once said that to someone, I think it was probably a therapist, and I'm like, I feel so bad and and they're like, that's because dolls and tea parties and puzzles are designed for infants.
Yes.
Are you an infant? It's not meant to be fun for you. And I'm like, oh my God, I thought it was meant to be fun for me.
Yeah.
I feel less guilty.
There's moments and, there's moments of fun. Like Poppy's playing board games now, which is a lot more interesting for me. But it gets boring.
So you didn't have postnatal the second time?
So with Eddie, she was always a better sleeper. And that made such a difference because she had a lot of feeding issues. With Poppy, and I'm actually sad that I didn't appreciate this more at the time, she fed like a troop. Like she was a champion. She taught me what to do from the minute that she was born. It was incredible. Whereas Eddie was just a completely uncoordinated kid when it came to breastfeeding. Literally had a disorganized suck, had tongue ties, colic, reflux, allergies, all of the things. I had mastitis 4 times in 4 months. So she was, a bit of a shit show when it came to feeding. But the sleep, the fact that she just slept that little bit more, even just napped more during the day, meant that I could binge watch Queer Eye or make dinners. Like I wasn't...
Kept you sane.
It kept me sane and it gave me that... And this sounds probably terrible for people who maybe don't understand, but I had time away.
Yeah.
I had time with her off me. I had time to do something for me during those moments that she was asleep. And so that really helped a lot. There was a moment at 5 months when we hadn't quite got her onto her allergy formula. I was still trying to breastfeed. I was basically a forced vegan, trying to get all of the dairy out of my body and all of these things. And I started to feel some of the dark thoughts coming back. And I immediately booked in to see my GP, saw the psychologist, did all of the things that I know sort of helped. I had my the sleep consultant on standby ready to help out if I needed. I got a nanny in to come once a week for a couple of hours, so I had a little bit of time away. So I had a lot of things in place because of my experience with Poppy, and I'm so grateful for that now because I understand the things that I need to make sure that I'm healthy and whole and ready to be there for my girls. But yeah, I never went into the depths of postnatal depression, but that's just because I was more experienced and more prepared.
I was thinking as I was reading the book about exercise and you, and you know, looking back, there are clearly times when you had bouts of depression through your career. And something that I noticed when I was diagnosed with anxiety is that exercise has always been a non-negotiable for me since I was quite young. And obviously not at your level, similar to your level.
You like to run, don't you?
A little bit on the treadmill. So quite similar to winning a gold medal at many, many Olympics.
Yeah,
but I realised in hindsight that I was actually self-medicating and keeping my anxiety at bay, not always successfully, but pretty much.
Yeah.
Do you think that because you had those endorphins and all of that, that of course your serotonin's going to be out when you stop exercising.
Yeah.
Is that also something that you know you've got to do?
Something I'm so passionate about. And the reason I discovered that was through my first retirement. I stopped exercise completely. It's like you go through a period of rebellion and you're like, I don't ever need to exercise. And I set my alarm to go for a run this morning, but I'll turn it off and sleep in because I can. And that's really fun for a period of time. But I think that contributed to the depression that I experienced in that first retirement. And so once I started to feel well, having come back to the sport and then going into retirement again, I realised that exercise for me is an absolute non-negotiable. And obviously life gets busy and time runs away from us, but for the most part, I'm exercising 3 to 5 times a week.
And that's self-care.
It's self-care and it's so important.
Yeah.
And, you know, my husband doesn't, like he can go for months without exercising and he's fine. But for me, it's an absolute non-negotiable. And, you know, particularly through my third pregnancy, it's been incredibly important for me to take care of myself. Weirdly, I've not really experienced anxiety before, but during this pregnancy, it's been really quite strong. So I just know that...
Related to the pregnancy or just in general? Because sometimes it has to...
It's definitely hormonal.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely hormonal. Like I can feel the surges of hormones happening.
Wow.
And that's when I become very anxious. But I just know that with that, I need to consistently exercise. And especially,
which is hard when you're really pregnant.
Oh, my God, so hard, so hard. But, you know, you do the best that you can. And, you know, there are going to be periods of time, particularly in the next 6 to 12 months, that I won't be able to exercise. And so you find other forms of things that might help you mentally. But exercise generally for me is just a non-negotiable as well.
Were you always going to have 3?
No.
Happy accident?
No. Intentional, which is even more bizarre, I think. Before I had kids, I just assumed I was going to be a mum of 2 boys because I'm a tomboy at heart. I love sport, obviously. So I just assumed I was going to be a mum of 2 boys. And then I had Poppy and I was like, oh, cool, a girl. This is weird. Now I'm going to have to navigate this whole thing. And she's a girly girl, loves dresses, loves getting her hair done. It's really weird. And then when I was pregnant with Eddie, I assumed, because it was a slightly different pregnancy, I still had nausea, but not as badly as I did with Pops. So I assumed that I was having a boy. And she popped out and she was a girl, and it took me 3 weeks to process that she was a girl and that I was now a mum of girls.
So you had a third to try to get a boy?
No. I kept expecting, because everybody says you know when you're done.
You do.
And I never got that.
Someone was missing.
Yes, it was really weird. And I just assumed that I was only ever going to have 2. And so I just kept waiting, and it was probably a good 12 months of me and my husband. And weirdly, he was like, yeah, I don't think we're done either. And so we went through 12 months because, you know, kids go through moments and you're like, there's no way I can have another one.
You've banged 3 out pretty quickly though.
Just over 4 years.
You'll have 3 under 4, under 5.
Yeah, 3 under 5. So,
Cool.
we got to sort of February this year. You're like, oh my God, good luck.
Economies of scale, babe. Economies of scale.
Look,
they can all play with each other.
But you know what? We decided at the start of the year, there's a third one there.
Yeah, it's a tribe.
They're thinking of the dining table, 20 years in the future. That's what we imagine. And we were like, do we wait? And we had some issues. Like, obviously, we had the miscarriage before Poppy, and then to get Eddie, I had to go into Clomid to get my cycle started again. So that took like 12 months.
Clomid made me crazy. Did it make you
my
crazy?
God, so crazy.
I had to have that to have my
flushes.
second as well.
Oh, right.
And also just anxiety, and I just went a bit crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, so I assumed it was going to take us like 6 to 12 months to get pregnant with the third, and I got pregnant immediately with this one. So we were not anticipating to have them so close together, but it was intentional. And yeah. But
I wonder if you'll feel done after this one.
I hope so. I think, Luke's definitely done after this one, and I think I will. But
Who knows?
Who knows? And,
It's pretty fun.
It is fun, and it is a complete shit show most of the time. Yeah. But what I've really leaned into is that it is a shit show, and just to have really low expectations of what every day will bring. And I think it's so funny because when you have higher expectations, you've like organised to take them to Disney on Ice, and you're like, this is going to be a great afternoon, everybody's going to have a great time, and you get there and one of them's losing it, one of them wants food, someone vomits. It's just a complete nightmare, and you're like, oh, why did I even bother doing this? And then you have a day where you're just at home, or you have to go to the grocery store, and like, this is going to be a nightmare. And you
just laugh.
They're perfect angels.
Yeah.
And you have someone comment, oh, they're just so well behaved. They're just hugging each other.
And you have a great time. And
you have a great time at the grocery store.
This is why I didn't get my tubes tied.
Totally. So it'll be a shit show for the next 3 to 5 years, but it's fun. I'm excited about it.
You.
Thank you.
Congrats on the book. It's so good. It's so good. And thank you for writing so honestly and openly and vulnerably, and writing about shame, and writing about fear of being a shit mum and a shit wife and a shit person, and you're none of those things. You're incredible, and we're all lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. That means so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of No Filter with Libby. Oh, that smile. You can't help but smile just looking at her. It's like her whole face is a smile. She's just an absolute delight. You can find a link to Libby's memoir, Beneath the Surface, in our show notes, and I highly recommend that you read it. I will be honest with you, I did not think that a memoir by a swimmer would be that interesting, because I thought, a lot of swimming up and down a pool. But the way it's been written and the structure of the book made it just absolutely fascinating. And I have to say, I have always been really curious about the lives of swimmers, because their lives seem so kind of isolated and cloistered off. And, listening to Libby talk, it's no wonder that so many of them, and not just swimmers, but all kinds of athletes, but particularly swimmers, tend to struggle when they retire from the sport. I'm Mia Friedman, and you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Mia Friedman, or you can sign up for my newsletter at miafriedman.com.au. And in the meantime, I'll see you on Mamma Mia.